Welcome to a new podcast, new episode, Make Happiness. Glad you're here. Glad you're listening. This is going to be super fun. Alex and I are sitting down. We're going to talk about the Tuscobia Winter Ultra race that we did last weekend. Do you want to start off, just kind of explain what the race is and go over that?
Sure. So the the Tuscobia Winter Ultra is a race in December in Wisconsin that you can either run, bike, or ski. There's a 80-mile length and then 160-mile length. The 160 starts in Rice Lake, Wisconsin, and then you go out 80 miles, and then you turn around and come back 80 miles on the same trail. The 80 miles just goes one way.
It's all snowmobile trail.
Yep. So none of it's on paved roads or gravel roads or dirt track or anything. It's all on snowmobile trail. There's plenty of snow this year, so there's a good base. So that's the entirety of the race.
Good start. Good start.
And podcast.
So we'll just dive straight in. The first, we got there Friday, and race is Saturday. It started at 6 a.m. There was a pre-race meeting and gear check that we had to go to, and we've never had to do that before, so that was kind of fun. There's mandatory gear you have to have. So you have to have a 0 degrees sleeping bag, a bunch of lights and extra batteries, and I think 10 inches of reflective material on the front and back, just so you're visible, because if you get hit by a snowmobile, you're not going to be too happy about it. So being seen is very important in this race. But going to the gear check on Friday was kind of fun. It was weird getting we didn't know what to do because we walked in just without any of our gear for whatever reason. We're just looking around, and then we had to go back to the cars to get our gear and walk back. I think that was redundant, but
yeah, I mean, it's our first time doing something like this, and we didn't want to have to go in and get our race plates and carry those out with all of our gear, that kind of thing. So we just went in with that. Before we get too far into that too, I want to talk about some of the training that we did in preparation for this, because obviously you don't just walk into something like this having not prepared at all, and especially being that you have to carry so much gear on your bike. So it's 160 miles we signed up for the long one. The longest ride that we'd ever done prior to that on our fat bikes was 70 miles, and so we had never even breached 100, and so we were going to be doing over double what our longest ride was previously. And then on top of that, we did a lot of riding with all the gear loaded on our bikes to get familiar with the weight, get familiar with pedaling that heavy of a bike through deep snow and that kind of thing. And our goal going into this race wasn't to win it and go fast. We were definitely going for comfort over speed. So we knew we had overpacked gear, and we had a little bit more on our bikes than necessary. We knew that we weren't going to be going super fast, but if the weather changed, if conditions got really harsh, we knew we had all the gear that we needed to be comfortable and continue going forward. So the race itself, it has a 48-hour time limit to go the 160 miles. So we knew that no matter what, we'd be able to get to the finish, even if you got to set up your bivvy and sleep for a few hours and then keep going. It's just you can get to the finish. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take to get there.
I wanted to say about the training stuff too. We were trying to figure out all the layering and all the gear to bring and all the different clothing, but looking at the weather was going to be just above freezing and raining for the majority of the race. So we brought 4 pairs of gloves. We bought 6 different shirts and 4 jackets with us. So we had so much shit.
Yep. And that's the thing. It was our first race, so there's things that you learn and things you take away. And there's a lot of that, which we'll get into later.
Well, it's also no matter how much you pack and how many rides you go on the night before the race, you're always second guessing every piece of gear that you have and trying to figure out if you need to bring this or
I think I took a couple pairs of gloves and socks in and out of my bag 2 or 3 times the couple days before. I'm I don't need it, and I'm well, now the weather's looking a little different. I'm gonna pack these, and it's a pair of gloves. Just leave them in there. But I like to compare it to your first time going camping or something like that, where you've never done it before, you're going to bring way too much stuff. And then as you go camping more, you find out, okay, I only need these things. And you just bring the necessities. And this was our first winter ultra. We packed way too much stuff. But we were aware we packed too much stuff because we were kind of familiar and knew what we were getting into. But we just hadn't, we were diving straight in.
Yeah. Like we've done, the ultra stuff in the summer, like the long rides. But the winter is a whole different thing.
Yep.
What do you want to talk about next?
Well, so you talked about the pre-race meeting. It was kind of cool. We were sitting there, and they were doing awards for people that had done it five years and completed it 5 years, and all these different really cool achievements that other racers had done. And then they called out the youngest racer to attempt the 160-mile event. They're like, "Yeah, you probably know who you are. You're 22 years old. You're from Minneapolis," and of course, it was Ian, and so he was the youngest rider to ever attempt the 160, let alone finish it. And so that was really cool, and he got recognized for that, which I think was another boost of, yep, we got to finish this thing.
Yeah.
Which we were already planning on. Like I said, we knew we'd get there. It's just a matter of how much time it would take.
I think that's half of it is just, putting into that state of mind of like, I'm going to finish. If you start out the race thinking like, well, I might DNF, then that right there is just already...
Any amount of uncertainty is going to wear you down, especially you're out there for hours and hours with nothing to do but think about how harsh this is or what's hurting on your body or what you didn't bring with you or what the too much stuff that you brought with you. And it's really easy to convince yourself that I don't want to continue. And so forcing yourself to stay in that mental state is a really big thing. With these kind of races, I think it's definitely more of a mental battle than a physical battle, and just being inside of your head for that amount of time.
Right. Well, then so on Friday, that racer meeting didn't finish till like 8 p.m. or something. We still needed to check into our hotel, bring our bikes up into the room, and load up our gear, and then get up at 4 a.m. the next day.
Yep. That was
stressful.
I was stressed and I was anxious to get back to the hotel and get stuff done because I wanted to get some sleep.
Yeah.
We went to sleep at like 10:30 maybe, and we woke up at 4.
Yeah.
And my bike is a longer bike. It's what's considered a cargo bike, so it doesn't fit in the back of the car. We actually had to bring a utility trailer towing behind the car, and we put both our bikes in the trailer. And so the morning of the race, we actually biked from our hotel 3 miles to the start, and we stopped at a Quick Trip and got some breakfast and that kind of thing on the way there. That was a couple blocks away, but it was a nice little warm-up on the way there. But then we also knew that after we finished, we would have to bike 3 miles back to the hotel.
So yeah, that was fun. And then bringing our bikes down the stairs with our like 80-pound bikes. I was really curious how much they weighed. They gotta be at least.
I think mine with all the gear I had was right around 75 pounds.
Yeah,
like ballpark, and that's a lot of weight to carry. And like I said, we knew we overpacked, but it's a pretty flat race. There's not a ton of hills, and so that was another thing that kind of pushed us to be like, well, if we have too much gear, it's not like we're climbing a bunch of really steep hills. It's just continuously going on a flat course for 160 miles. But that's the other thing that we learned midway through the race is there are no downhills. You can coast and let your legs rest. It's flat, so you are pedaling for 160 miles. You can't coast and take a break. If you stop pedaling, the bike stops and you're not moving.
Yeah, you're slowing down significantly if you stop.
And then so the race start was 6 a.m. Saturday. Conditions were really good at the start. It was like 15 degrees, 20 degrees. And so in these kind of races on snowmobile trail, you actually want colder temperatures because the snow packs better and just stays in better conditions for...
It's much easier to ride through.
Yep. And so that was really good. It was really good hard pack, and we were able to maintain, 10 or 12 mile an hour pace for the first quarter of the race, which was awesome.
Well, yeah, so the race started, and we're probably right behind the first group of people. There was one break at the start, like a sprint, so there was maybe 6 of us.
Yeah, so at the start there were 52 bikers doing the 160-mile event.
Yeah.
So there was 52 people that left, and we were probably up in that top 10 or 15 people that kind of broke away. Well, everybody else is going a casual pace, and we knew if we can just hold it with them, not pushing ourselves too hard, we'd be able to get a little bit further ahead of the pack.
Well, I wanted to bring this up. Alex, for whatever reason, just wanted to keep up with the guy in first, so he just books it. He's literally like sprinting like 17, 18 miles an hour. And then I start falling back, and I'm just like, okay, I guess I got to go catch him. So I like trying to haul ass and just slow him down, just like, Alex, what are you doing?
I knew he wasn't going to hold 17, 18, so I was trying to stay with him through that gap he was putting in because I knew at some point he would back off and slow down. But he didn't back off as quick as I thought he would, so I had to slow down. But, you got to try, and then, it didn't work out. So.
Yeah. It was just like, Alex, I caught up to him. I'm like, this is a long race. This is a marathon. You need to pace yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Don't jump the gun. But that was fun. And then there's maybe a group of, like I said, 6 of us that kind of like rode together for that first quarter of the race. And then there's a halfway point called Ojibwa.
Well, not halfway to the turnaround. So you're 45 miles into the race is the first checkpoint.
So that was it's like a warming house kind of thing where they got a fire pit or a fireplace and a bunch of food and warm water. So that was super nice. But we all kind of held together for that section. There was Kate, I don't remember her last name.
Kate Coward.
Yeah, we got to ride with her for quite a bit just before that checkpoint, and everyone else kind of started spacing out a little bit and like slowing down, going their own pace. So. Yep,
and then we were in that first checkpoint for 10 minutes and left because we knew we had all the things we needed on our bikes. We just basically went in, filled up on water, downed some snacks real quick, and then kept moving.
Yeah.
And as soon as we left there, that was probably 4-ish hours into the race.
Yeah.
We left that first checkpoint, and it was snowing. I remember we got outside we left the inside of the building, got outside, and it was snowing. Got on our bikes and started going. And it was really cool biking in the snow in the middle of all these pine trees and wilderness with all the snow falling. And then the snow turned to rain, and it got warmer. And the snow that we were riding on slowly got softer, and we stopped. I put on some rain gear.
I wanted to bring up too, while it was snowing and that transitioning point to like sleet to rain, our whole bikes were just like covered with like a sheet of ice.
Yeah.
It's just like, my zipper on my frame bag, I had to like take off the ice before I could open up my zipper.
Right. It was definitely a weird environment.
Yeah.
And you can't really train for that. That's just one of those things, because who wants to go bike in 35 degrees and rain? And so
apparently we do. Well, 160 miles of it.
Yeah, but that wasn't by choice. It's just the conditions the race were.
Yeah.
I'm talking about for like a training ride. You can train for the cold, but that kind of stuff is just, well, this is happening. So yeah, swapped out rain gear and got stuff situated, and then we continued on there. From there was
and then we continued on.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And then it was 35 miles from there to the halfway point in Park Falls. And that was a pretty good stretch. I don't think we had any issues there.
No, the snow was like progressively getting a little bit worse and a little bit like, throughout because at that point it was just kind of steady rain.
Yep.
So we were just trying to stay wet and warm essentially. Like that was the game, is just as long as you're warm and wet, that's fine. But as soon as you stop and you start getting cold, like then it's
right,
game over.
Because your body's not generating any more heat.
Yeah.
And we knew looking at the weather before the race had started that the first half was going to be quicker than the last half because the rain wasn't supposed to start till later in the morning. And so we had kind of had a loose game plan of let's get as many miles done while it's cold and we can go fast. Mm-hmm. And then after that, it's whatever conditions it is, we got to just keep moving. And so getting to that first halfway point, 80 miles in, that took 9 hours.
Park Falls.
Yep. And so we were like, well, I mean, if conditions stay the same and we can hold this pace, we'll be back, before midnight, which would be awesome. And so it set the bar high, and we were, spirits were pretty good at that point. We were at the halfway point was a gastro pub. There was a bar, and they had really awesome volunteers there. They had soup and grilled cheese and all kinds of stuff, and they were taking our water bottles and filling them up and taking our layers and drying them out. And I was just like, you are doing too much.
Yeah, they were, they were super helpful, which is really awesome. But I wanted to jump back a little bit. When we were going out to Park Falls, that was when there's a shorter race, 80-mile version, that starts at 10 a.m. at Park Falls and just goes one way back to Rice Lake. So when we were heading out towards Park Falls, maybe it was like 20 miles or so, we started to see all of the 80 milers go the other way. So a lot of other bikers and runners we were passing going the opposite way. So that was kind of fun to chat with them and like say, hey, like keep kicking ass, or, like just.
Exactly. And it just broke up the monotony of being on a isolated trail by yourself. So seeing other racers out there just makes time go by a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
It's just a change of scenery.
When it was fun when we were going out, we were trying to figure out like, oh, was that the first biker for the 80 mile, or like, are those two, like, are they the leaders? Like,
yeah. Trying to see how far of a gap the leaders had and what pace people were keeping.
There was one runner too. This is pretty cool. When we rode past, he just goes, hey, is that the 22-year-old? Like, you're killing it. Like, keep it up. And so that was pretty cool.
A couple of people recognized Ian from being recognized at the racer meeting, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
After the fact, too, I saw on Facebook one of the bikers doing this race had a mechanical malfunction the night before the race started. And so he opted to run the race instead. And so he took all of the gear that he was going to bike with, put it on a sled, and ran the race. And he finished. And I was just like, Jesus Christ, that guy's a warrior.
Right.
But I'm sure he was in there somewhere that we saw pass us. I didn't know till after the fact, but that was pretty crazy. But yeah, and then the halfway point at Park Falls at the pub, we spent 45 minutes there, which was longer than we wanted to, but we were cold, we were tired, all of our clothes were soaking wet.
And there was real food there. There was pizza we got. Like, we were taking our time.
Exactly. And we made good time there, and we wanted to dry our clothes out, so we did as much as we could and we pulled the liners out of our boots and tried to let the liners dry off. And we had brought dry layers, so we put on some dry base layers, put on dry socks, dry gloves,
and then put all of the wet stuff into our bike and add another 4 or 5 pounds.
Exactly, which I didn't even register until after the fact. But you're taking off wet gear and putting on dry gear, but you still have to carry that wet gear. And so all of this water that's soaked into your clothing and into the fabric, you're just carrying that water weight on your bike. So the bikes progressively got heavier as we went on, which is really defeating.
Yeah.
And so we put on dry layers, and then
we were talking with a couple people too, because there's maybe like 6 or 7 racers in there, maybe like 5 or something, because there were more racers coming in while we were drying out and hanging out. So we were chatting with some other people, and that was pretty fun. There was that one guy who this is his 5th year doing it, and
right. And the halfway point is a popular spot for people to drop to and discontinue the race because of they just are at a point of exhaustion where they can't continue. Mm-hmm. And so there were a few people that were talking about dropping, and our cousin was coming along to shoot some video for the race, and actually ended up giving a guy a ride back to the start because he was dropping and he needed to get his bike back. And yeah, it was really cool talking to all the racers there and just hearing the stories about past years and how terrible this year is.
Right, yeah.
That's what every single person was saying, was how awful this was.
This was one of the worst ones.
Yeah. And so we got all the dry layers on and then went back outside to continue after the 45 minutes. And you go outside for 5 minutes and everything is soaking wet again.
Yep.
So it's kind of like, why bother putting on the dry stuff? And that sucked, because then you're just carrying all that extra water weight.
And then we got back onto the trail and started heading back, so we're going backwards now, back to Park Falls. We're going on the same trail on our way back. And the snow was at this point pretty mushy, so a lot of some of the like terms people use is mashed potatoes, because it's that soft and kind of like there's no it's not like solid.
There's none of it packs.
Yeah.
The consistency of it is just super loose. Mm-hmm. And at that same time, like we were saying, on our way out to the halfway point, we saw the runners and skiers coming back. And so now on our way back, we're following that track that they had all taken already. Mm-hmm. And so all the runners going through this, their feet are just post-holing in the snow. And so you can just imagine a bunch of little foot-sized potholes in the snow, and you're trying to ride a bike through that. And it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And there's just this tiny little, maybe 8-inch wide shelf that's packed from other bikers that you can ride for a little bit. But if your tire comes off of that little shelf at all, it just gets sucked into the loose powder and it pulls you off of that track. And so you're trying to ride this little skinny balance beam for miles and miles. And every time that you lose your balance or get a little bit off, you put a foot down and then you've got to and stop.
Right.
And then you've got to get going again.
Yeah, there was one time when I was riding and my front wheel got pulled, and then I went off into the soft stuff, and my front wheel just went straight in, probably like a foot. So I just went over the bars and fell into the powder and like fell off into the ditch.
Yeah, well, you went off to the right side of the trail, which there's like the ditch that goes down, and that's soft powder. So you put your foot down, and you immediately go up to your thigh in powder.
Right.
And Ian just tips all the way over.
And then I was like climbing out of the ditch, and there's some snowmobilers come by, and they slowed down and asked to see if I'm all right, which is really cool. Like, that was awesome. But I was just like, yep, just, looking at the trees down here, like, snow and the flowers.
Yeah, and it wasn't too long after we started heading back that the sun was going down, so most of the ride back was in the dark, I would say. We were probably only in the light for maybe an hour or two, and then the sun went down.
Less than that.
And so sun went down, and you're soaking wet. All of your clothes are wet. You're warm for the most part because you're moving, but
if you stop, you get cold.
That's the thing. You're riding this little balance beam. You can't get water while you're riding. You can't snack on food while you're riding. You have to stop and then take out your water and get a drink, or take out your food and snack on it and then put it away and then keep biking, because you can't do any of it while you're riding. Mm-hmm. And on these gravel races we've done in the summer, we're so used to being able to do all of this while we're moving, which is a huge gain in efficiency, just because of every time you stop, that's more time added to your finish time. And so the more things you can do while you're moving, the better. And it added up so couckly. So
when we started slowing down quite a bit too, like we were only going like 8 miles an hour probably at that point. We couldn't carry a fast pace because the conditions were pretty like bad.
And it was getting really frustrating. You get super pissed because you can't ride your bike. You try to pedal and you just keep falling over, and you're fatigued and you're sleep deprived, and you're just want to be able to keep moving and just find a rhythm. And we were getting really pissed about this, not being able to ride. And then finally it dawned on Ian, actually brought it up. He's like, yeah, we should probably air down. And I was just like, oh, no shit. That makes a ton of sense. And just never crossed our minds, because you're just in this weird place. And so we stopped, we let air out of our tires, and that made the biggest difference in the world. And from there we were able to ride easier than we were before. It was still super, super difficult, but we were able to at least stay upright on the bikes. And at this point we're going back, and we're still towards the front of the pack in the 160 milers. Out of those 52, we knew we were in the top 10. And so we had put quite a bit of a gap in there, staying with those front racers, and we started seeing other 160 milers on their way out to that halfway point at Park Falls while we were on our way back. And you could see a lot of them having the same issue, putting foots down and like getting squirrely on the trail in the loose snow. And so there was a few of them where we're like, yeah, did you let air out of your tires? It'll make a difference. And some of them were like, yeah, I've already done it 3 times. And some of the other people were like, no, I didn't think about that. That's a good idea. So being able to just talk to other people, see how they're doing, and just having human to human interaction sometimes makes a big difference when you're out there.
It was also like when we were going back, we caught up to all of the runners that were carrying their sleds.
Yep.
So we had to pass.
Well, not carrying; they're pulling their sleds.
Yeah. We had to pass all these runners on this shelf, and so they're walking on the trail, and they're like packing this down for us and riding the only solid spot. So we have to go out into the middle of the trail where the snowmobiles ride, and where it's really soft, and it's like a foot deep of just like slop basically, and you got to go faster to pass them, and then you got to get back over onto the shelf where it's packed again, and that was really, really tough.
I know there was at least 2 or 3 times we were passing runners, and yeah, so it's the bikers, runners, and skiers. They're all using this little shelf. So anytime, and obviously the bikes are moving at the fastest pace, so we're trying to pass all of these people as we catch them. And there was 2 or 3 of them where we get up to them. I go out into the middle of the snowmobile trail and start breaking trail to get around them. And as soon as you hit that, like Ian was saying, you're trying to speed up to pass them, and I would just immediately slow down. And then trying to get back over, I'd lose my track and then fall over and put a foot down. And then the walker or the runner just slowly passes me, and then I have to get behind them and try to do it again. And so you're literally getting passed by people walking with sleds, and it's such a challenging mental battle because you're fighting so hard and exerting so much energy just to be able to go 4 miles an hour.
Right. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about that mentality stuff because I was like in a pretty bad mental spot. Like, the last half of the race, I was not doing well. I didn't have any training because of my foot injury, and
Yeah, you should talk about that.
a couple months ago, I tore 2 ligaments in my ankle, so I was off a bike for 6 weeks probably. So before this race, I only had 3 weeks on a bike. So it's not a whole lot of time to train and ride for this kind of a race.
Let alone a loaded bike with all kinds of gear on it.
Yeah. But thankfully, my ankle is actually feeling pretty good. Like, it wasn't sore or anything because the boots that I had are super stiff, so your ankle's not really moving a whole lot anyways. But because of that lack of training, my mental state and my body was just so exhausted. I was literally running on 0% energy for the last probably 60 miles of the race. And I was getting so pissed at everything. And Alex was just like, dude, it's fine. I was just like, I'm not taking any of this. Like, I seriously was going, it was bad. I don't know why I kept getting so pissed at it. I think I was letting all the conditions in the environment kind of control my emotions versus me controlling, like, taking the environment and just kind of taking it as it is. I was letting everything get to me. So I was just getting in my own head about everything, like, it's happening to me versus I'm, just doing it on my own or like, reversing it. But
Right. And it's really hard when we spent maybe 2 or 3 hours going 4 miles an hour, if that. And so you're going 4 miles down the trail, just 4 miles, and it takes you an hour.
right.
And trying to accept that and know that, okay, like this could be the rest of the race. And that it eats at you. It's really hard to get over that.
It's defeating.
It's one of those things where you just have to accept it and just be like, well, this is what it is. And
I was-
are we going to keep going? Or I have the choice to stop if I want to stop and DNF. But that's not the like where we were. So
Yeah,
we wanted to finish.
You were definitely a lot better at just accepting it and kind of moving forward, where I was just in my own head, like, so pissed at everything. But the only thing that, like, that was a positive thing for me was that finishing was the only option still. In my head, I was like, I'm not DNFing. Like, I'm finishing this, but I might finish in the afternoon on Sunday. We talked about earlier. Like,
Yep.
that was the only thing that was still in my mind. Where, like, yeah, this is the worst possible conditions, and I'm cold and I'm wet, but, like, I'm not, I'm pissed at everything, but I'm not going to stop. I'm just going to keep going.
Right. And then, yeah, so it was pretty rough. It was cold, and then we got back to that
Ojibwa.
the middle checkpoint. Yep. So that was from there we had 45 miles left to finish. So we were there for 20 minutes. We were drying out layers and warming up and taking the whatever snacks and food that we wanted. We
Refilling water.
Yep, water. And after that 20 minutes, we got back out on the bikes and continued on. I had to change batteries in my headlight at that point, but luckily all the other batteries on my lights worked the whole time.
I think it was because it was warm. Our batteries didn't die as quickly.
Yep, which is a nice luxury. And so
when we left, though, after those 20 minutes, I was shaking. Like, my body was so cold because it's been sitting. And so getting outside where it's raining again and wet, I was just like, shivering, trying to, like, regulate my body again and just get going.
Yep. And we were wearing chamois underneath of our, the 45 North pants that we had on for the outer shell. And bike chamois have a padding on the bottom for sitting on the saddle for so long. And so that just acts as a sponge. And so you're sitting on this wet sponge for 24 hours, and it's not comfortable at all.
Yeah, there is getting back on the bikes after that checkpoint was really hard too, because my knees were hurting quite a bit because of how much power that we're, like, trying to, you're using so much energy trying to push through all of this really mushy snow. So my knees were super sore, and it was just really painful to get going again. And I was just trying to get back into the rhythm, but
That's another good point. Yeah, with this kind of a snow condition, you can't just downshift into a lower gear and spin it out.
yeah,
You have to be in a high gear because you need momentum to be able to get through the snow. And so being in a higher gear means you're putting a ton of power down, like Ian was saying, and that causes your knees to hurt and your legs to cramp because you're just exerting such a heavy amount of force into going 4 miles an hour.
We maybe like an hour or two out from that checkpoint, the last one, Ojibwa. So we have maybe 30 miles left or 25 miles left.
Yeah.
There's Chris and Helen are the two race directors. They're the ones who kind of put this race on. And Chris, the whole day, was kind of driving up and down on a snowmobile, checking up on people and asking them if they need a ride or if they want a DNF. And he passed us. Well, he passed us and was just like, "Hey, how are you guys doing?" We're just like, "Yeah, we're doing good." And he goes, "All right, see you at the finish," and just kept going.
Because we were stopped at that point getting some water and food, and so we were just standing next to the trail. So
Yeah.
he was just checking up to see how things were going.
Which is pretty awesome that he's like, making sure everyone's doing all right and whatever.
Exactly. It gives you a little bit of reassurance that you're not going to just, be left alone to fend for yourself out there. But it could come to that point if it's the middle of the night, because they're not out there all night.
Right.
There's a point where he quits doing his laps on the snowmobile, but that last bit from that third checkpoint to the finish was by far the worst conditions the trail was in the whole race, because it kept snowing or raining. Yeah, I wish it was snowing. It kept raining and it kept getting warmer, so it was between 35 and 37 degrees that whole last stretch, and we aired down our tires 3 or 4 times, continuously getting lower pressure, and it helped, but only so much. And there's points where you're walking there, like I said, it's a pretty flat course, but there's a few hills where the trail will dip down into a little valley for a creek crossing or like a railroad, and then you have to come back up. And we were to the point where we would coast down the downhill and coast as far up the hill as you could go, and we wouldn't even try biking it because there's no way, and it's not worth exerting that much energy, so we'd just get off and walk. And it's very, very slow going, and it was a really big mental push to be able to get past that.
So now it's probably midnight right now, like during the race maybe. So we were, at this point, we've had a full day of riding in rain and cold, and you're completely, delirious.
Nothing was dry.
Yeah.
You're fatigued, your body hurts.
We're going through up and down these, there's a lot of road crossings too, so you kind of jog across all these roads, but they're actually pretty icy too because of all the rain. So anytime you get onto the road, I was super glad that I had a front studded tire, just because on those sections where it's like sheer ice on the road, so it was nice to have something to stay upright, because our bikes are 80 pounds or whatever, and they can slip pretty easily if you turn at all.
Right. And yeah, we kept going. We knew that there was going to be a snowmobile clubhouse that was available to racers after 10 p.m. because 10 p.m. was when the gas station that was in this town, Birchwood, closed. And so from 10 p.m. on, this clubhouse was available for racers to go inside and bivvy in if they need to sleep, or just get inside for a little bit. And when they were going over this at the racer meeting, they said that it was 16 miles from the finish or 19 miles from the finish. I'm just like, 19 miles? Why would you stop from the finish 19 miles? And just go, keep powering through. And then we're getting closer to this point, and it's midnight, 12:30, whatever. And doing the math in my head about how far we have left to go, which, 19, 20 miles, but that's 4 or 5 hours. And so, yeah, it's not that far of a distance, but at those speeds, it's not about distance. It's about how much time you're spending in those elements. And my mind flipped total 180. I'm like, oh, thank God that this thing is available. That sounds amazing.
Well, when we got to that the clubhouse, we stopped, and I was just like, yeah, Alex, do you want to go inside and we can warm up for a little bit? And you're just like, no, dude, let's just finish.
But to add to that, we had just passed 2 other racers in the 160.
Yeah.
So we knew that we were 8th and 9th right now. We broke the top 10. So, because we were keeping track of kind of where we were. Mm-hmm. And that's why my response was, no, let's keep going. We can do this. And
we get probably half a mile down the trail, or 3/4 of a mile down the trail, and you just start shaking, and you're literally just okay,
we stopped, and I put on a jacket underneath my rain jacket.
Yeah.
I switched gloves, so I had dry gloves, and I put hand warmers into my gloves, because that's the thing, your gloves are soaking wet, so your fingers, they turn to, if you've been in the pool too long or a tub, your fingers get pruny. They looked like white latex gloves that had been hit with a hair dryer and all shriveled up, but it was your skin. and you had no choice but to keep wearing the wet gloves. And so I put on dry gloves, hand warmers, and was like, okay, I got warmer stuff on. We can keep doing this. And as I'm changing my clothes and I get back on my bike, my body's just shaking. And I like looking back on it now, I think it was, early signs of like hypothermia or whatever, just because you're trying to stay warm, but your body can't generate heat because it's the wetness.
You had a very like serious look on your face of just like, we need to turn around. Like,
Well, because there was no amenities from there to the finish. I knew there was nothing. That was our amenity. And so
we turned around and rode the mile back to
backtracked to the warming house. And the other thing was when we passed it, you could smell smoke. And so it was like, I know they have a fire going inside, like a fireplace. And that just sounded like such a
heavenly thing.
It was a beautiful little oasis.
Yeah.
And so, we backtracked, went inside there, and got inside. And we laid our stuff out in front of the fireplace and sat up next to it.
We're shaking, trying to like.
We were shivering, and there was a handful of people in there that run the clubhouse that were there stoking the fire and being there for racers. And she sounded a little concerned about me with how much I was shivering, and she's like, "Yeah, stay as long as you need, do whatever." And it was just like asking if I was okay, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." It's just trying to control my body temperature, but.
And like your knuckles were so white, like your whole hand was just.
Yeah, it was a really weird experience because it's above freezing, and so you don't think that hypothermia or frostbite is a concern because it's 35 degrees. Mm-hmm. But when you're wet, it changes everything. And like I said, we haven't really trained in those conditions. How do you prepare for that? So this was a whole new thing, and definitely learned a lot from it. But no, you can get frostbite and hypothermia in those conditions.
Well, we were sitting around that fire warming up and hanging out. They had some cookies and some hot chocolate we were drinking. That was super nice.
Oh, yeah.
And then there were a couple racers who came in. There was a runner and then like 2 other bikers who came in.
Yep. Well, over the course that we were there, we were probably there for an hour and a half, 2 hours.
We were there for a long time.
But the 2 that showed up after we were there, when we got there, nobody was in there. It was just us. Mm-hmm. The next 2 that showed up, we're talking about a runner a few miles back on the trail that seemed to be kind of losing it and getting a little delirious. And he was worried about his core temperature dropping. He said he couldn't feel his fingers or his extremities. And he was getting out his bivy, which is like a personal tent. And he was getting ready to get into his bivy and his 0-degree sleeping bag to warm up. And he started setting it up directly on the snowmobile trail, which they went over in the racer meeting. I mean, obviously that's a big no, don't do that. You're going to get run over by a snowmobile. And so these 2 guys that came into the warming house talking about it said they stopped, tried to help him out. Like, hey dude, keep your gloves on. Like, we'll set up your bivy for you. And he was just like, no, I got it. I can do it. And they were like, well, I'm getting cold. So if you're going to be stubborn about this, I'm going to keep moving. And it sounded like he was just setting it up directly in the trail and he wasn't going to move it. And I think that guy was not in a good spot in his head.
Yeah, he was just like, well, my wife knows where I am and whatever, but it's like, she's
going to know where your body is when a snowmobile runs you over.
Right. Like, that doesn't help anything. So you ended up, you texted Chris, the race director, and just letting him know, like, hey, there's this guy who's kind of, setting up his bivy in the middle of the trail. You might want to check on him.
Right. And I don't know if he went back out, but he just responded, thank you. So it's like, that's all I wanted was like, just so I can pass this information along, do what you need to do with it. But
because that's a little serious. Like if something like that happens or like.
Right. And so when we were doing that last stretch from the 3rd checkpoint to the finish, you could see, because it's dark out, it's after midnight and it's getting cold. Mm-hmm. Not like temperature wise, but you were getting cold. And you could see on the trail because all the runners are pulling these sleds, and same with skiers. And you're going down this trail and you could see little chutes that go off into the powder on the left and the right of the trail. There'd be like a couple footsteps and then you'd see the track of their sled going off because people would get off of the trail and they were setting up bivvies on the trail because people were getting cold and didn't want to be out. People were tired and fatigued. And so there was, I don't know, probably half a dozen different tracks that I saw going off of the trail that people were hunkering down for the night or a few hours or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the other thing that put it in my head, like, okay, maybe we're getting to a point where we should think about getting an hour of sleep. I was exhausted at this point too. I was the point where you close your eyes and like open them and then you close them and like you're not really sure how long you had them closed. You're just kind of slowly nodding off. Mm-hmm. And I was really pushing Ian to like, hey, maybe we should just bivvy for like an hour and then keep going, or like we've got another day to finish this thing. And
Well, so we're sitting inside the fire at that warming house, the clubhouse, and we're talking about with the other two bikers who are in there, and now they're we're talking about like, what's your plan? Yeah, like, are you gonna sleep here? Like, and then we're going over it, and we're saying that, well, our hotel is for 2 nights, and we have to check out by 11 on Sunday. So
which at this point it's 12:30 in the morning.
No, it's like
it's
1 or
1,
2.
yeah, Sunday.
Yeah.
So we had to get back to get our shit out of the hotel.
So we're just like, yeah, we just have to keep riding through. Like, we need to check out. So we ended up having some coffee and taking the 20-minute nap. And then,
and nap. We were sitting upright in chairs with our head just tilted forward and resting our eyes.
Yeah.
that was the nap.
And it helped, honestly.
I felt so much better. If you drink the coffee before and then do the little 20-minute nap, I've never really done that before. It made such a difference. That was a huge help, especially for me where I was at that point of like needing to fall asleep. Mm-hmm. And we brought 5-hour energy shots with us and stuff. But once you're to that level of exhausted, it seems like it works for half an hour or something, but then you're more tired than you were before because you come down from that caffeine high. And so you can't just keep chugging those things because that's going to mess you up worse. And so it was
It's brutal.
Yeah.
So we took the nap. We started slowly getting our stuff.
Which most of our stuff was pretty dry.
Yeah.
We took the liners out of our boots again. We took our layers off and everything. And again, you get back outside, 10 minutes into it, you're just as wet as you were before. But our bodies were warm. That's the thing.
Right.
Our skin and our core had time to warm up inside. So we're not shivering. Yeah, you're wet, but at least you feel warmer. But the trail, it was raining that whole time. So those 2 hours we were inside, it was just
getting worse.
Terrible. Like, absolutely horrible.
There were puddles all over the trail.
There were spots where you'd go through a 10-foot long puddle of water that's across the entire trail. And so you're getting through that, and it's underneath that's a foot of snow. So it's just this slushy slop that you can't even bike in. Mm-hmm. And Ian was super pissed. I was trying to, talk him off of this ledge a little bit, but then he just was bitching me out. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to stop talking.
Yeah, dude. I think the issue, I just wasn't keeping my mind off of I needed to put my mind somewhere else to think about, some other environments, but my mind was just so focused on how terrible everything was.
Well, and like you said, you hadn't put the time in. Like, I'd been biking tons before this because I didn't have an ankle injury.
I was completely destroyed. Everything was so painful, and my legs, everything was just so stiff, and everything hurt. I was getting a little bit of numbness in my hands too from just sitting in the same hand position for so long.
Yep.
So my fingers were hurting, and everything was just I was just very sad and defeated. I was
and if you can imagine having wet clothes on for that long and your legs making that movement, you get a lot of chafing in a lot of uncomfortable areas.
Yes.
And there's nothing you can do about it. There's absolutely nothing you can do. And by the time we finished, the day afterwards, I noticed on the outsides of my calves and behind my knees, there's scabs where the skin literally got rubbed off of my leg because of this wet, abrasive fabric just continuously rubbing. And there's some patches of hair on my calf that's not there because it just kept rubbing. And yeah, I didn't know that at the time. I was just like, oh yeah, I'm wet, everything hurts. You don't know what hurts and what doesn't. And so then after the fact, I was just like, oh, that's what that was.
So we're riding along through the puddles and stuff. Right now it's 4 a.m., 5 a.m. We got maybe 10 miles left. So we're getting really close, and now all we're thinking about is just being done.
You just visualize that finish line, but 4 or 5 miles, that's still an hour or two.
Yeah.
And you're not thinking about the miles, you're thinking about the time.
Because, we're just well, we're not going to get back to 6 or 7, and then go straight to the hotel and get a couple hours of sleep and then drive home. We're just talking about what are we going to do when we get back. And
yeah.
It was insane.
We started at that point from that little warming house we were at. The rest of the way we had passed, there was a handful of runners. We probably passed, I don't know, 8 or 10 runners. And those are people most likely doing the 80 mile that had started at 10 a.m. that morning. And they were running the entire day or walking, pulling their sled. And I don't know how they did that, but More power to you.
So we passed. We're probably the last 4 miles. You turn off onto a different trail. So you get off the Tuscobia trail, you cross a highway, and then you go left
Yep.
to the finish.
And that's a 4 mile stretch there that takes you back to the start, which it's still a snowmobile trail. It's
Yeah.
just a different snowmobile trail.
Yeah, it's like the one like there's 2 turns in the entire race, and that's one of the turns.
Yep. Well, that's the turn going out, and then the second one is that turn coming back.
Right.
And we knew from the start that was really good trail, and it was hard packing. So we were just hoping that it was still going to be in somewhat decent condition.
And it was.
Yeah, which was amazing. But at the same time, you're still only going 4 or 5. And so going 4 or 5 miles an hour, like if you can hold 6 to 8 versus 4 to 5, it's the biggest difference in the world. It doesn't seem like much, but that shaves off so much time for in 1 hour, the amount of miles and distance you can cover.
Right.
And so I was really trying to just like edge Ian up to let's just go a mile an hour faster. Let's just go a little bit harder.
And I just kept dropping back. Like
he couldn't do it.
yeah, Alex was going like 8 miles an hour, and then I just see like his bike and his rear lights just
That's what I kept-
progressively like getting further away from me, and I'm just like, well, see you at the finish.
I
Like,
kept looking back and I was like, well, I'm not going to drop him, because there were points where I was genuinely concerned about Ian being able to stay upright on his bike, not because of the trail or how difficult it was, but because of his mental state. He sounded like he was, on the verge of just falling over and going to sleep.
I was broken.
He was very broken. There was a point too where because we're trying to eat food, so sick of Uncrustables.
Yeah, we just had those PB&Js that are prepackaged.
They're great because it's like a serving size. You got peanut butter, jelly, and
Not
bread.
after 7 of them.
Yeah, that it got to be a little bit much. But there was one point where we stopped to munch on those, and Ian ate one, and then what was it? About 30 seconds later,
a couple minutes later,
your lungs are dying because you're breathing so heavy out here, and like you keep coughing, like you can't help it. Your lungs just hurt. And there's one point where Ian coughed and then threw up his sandwich, and it's like, well, there goes all your nutrients.
Right. I was just like, okay, like another, this is another thing, I guess.
And that's why, like I kept pulling away from Ian when I was trying to go faster. I was like, well, I'm not going to drop you and see you at the finish. Like we got 4 miles to go, but you need to get to the finish. And as we're getting closer, I was looking at my, the GPS I use, you can see the map. And so I was looking at the map because I could tell how far it was to the start point on there, because you could see the track that we had already gone on, and it's got a scale on the map, so I knew it was about a half mile or 3/4 of a mile up, and you could see the water tower in the town and some of the lights and stuff. And so there was this opening in the trees, and I was just telling you, I'm like, that's the finish, dude. Like you see that opening, like that's the street crossing that we need to get to. And so I was just, I wasn't really looking up. You're just kind of looking at the trail like 3 feet in front of your tire, and just keep watching that and keep pedaling.
And we get to there's one, they're like a road crossing, and then I see the building, and I see the sign that says Tuscobia Winter Ultra,
because it's on the right side. It's not across the trail. It's off on the right. And
I was just like, okay, like thank God we're here. Like this is it. We're done now. Like it's finally over. So I like peel off and turn, and Alex just keeps going straight. Just keeps riding along. Misses the turn.
I had no idea. I was like, it's a block up. I see the finish. That's it. We're here. And then I hear Ian yell, Alex, where are you going? And like Helen, the other race director that's at the finish, is just laughing at me like, what's he doing?
Is he going for 200? Does he want some more miles?
Just jokingly like, yeah, we're done already. Like, I want more. It's like, well, I still have to bike to the hotel, so there will be more. We were joking about that too when we were miserable out there. We're like, yeah, do we stop at the finish or do we just keep going and go straight to the hotel?
Yeah.
But yeah, I only went, 30 feet past it or something. Then I turned around.
It was still funny.
It was great. Yeah.
So we get there. Helen takes our photo, and then we go inside and talking. This right now, it's like 6:15 in the morning.
No, it was like 6:03.
Yeah.
Like it was just after 6 a.m. And so the total duration, we were out there for 24 hours is how long it took. And I was saying earlier, to get out to the halfway point took us 9 hours. Getting back from the second half was 13 hours.
Yeah.
So that's how much slower it was coming back.
Yeah, it was nice just being done. I was just excited to like sit inside, and I was just like, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
I've completed it.
Yeah.
It's done.
And we're inside giving our time to the race official that's doing the timekeeping, and she was telling us, "Do you have dry layers with you? You need to get out of those wet clothes because now that you're not generating body heat, you're gonna start shivering and get cold because your body can't stay warm." And she's like, "I've already had to have 3 people get into their sleeping bags because they don't have dry clothes," and we're just like, "Well, no, it's all back at the hotel," and she's like, "Well, you should." Get going and like figure that out. And
Well, there was free pizza too that we sat and we were eating for.
oh yeah,
That was great.
yeah. We were really looking for. There was free beer and pizza, but beer did not sound so
Appetizing.
no, not at all.
Yeah, we had the pizza, and then I ended up because of my mental state and my like sheer exhaustion of my body. I got a ride because my bike could fit in the car. Alex's couldn't because of his long wheelbase. So my cousin drove me back to the hotel, which is awesome. I was so excited to be in a
One,
warm.
we just needed to get to sleep because at that point it was 6 a.m. We had to be checked out by 11.
Yeah.
And so we were like, well, Ian can get a ride back. He'll get there first and take a shower and change. And then by the time I'm there, he'll be done. So that way we can just, as quick as possible, get into bed and sleep. And I stopped and ate pizza and stuff and then got back on the bike in the cold and the rain and biked back. But I was just like, this is fine. I'm on pavement. Like I get to ride hard pavement on the road the rest of the way back. And nope, it still sucked. It was really long and shitty. And then, of course, we're on the second floor of the hotel. It's like kind of this lodge thing on the shore of the lake. And I had carried my bike up the stairs the night before when we were getting everything prepped for the race. And carrying it, well, I guess 2 nights before at this point, carrying it up that time, my bike definitely weighed like 20 pounds more than it did before because all of the wet clothes, all of the bags that are on my bike, I've got the pogies that cover your handlebars, all that fabric, every single bit of it is holding water. And so that extra weight, just carrying it up the stairs, it just really hit me like that's how much heavier this is. And my rain jacket that's supposed to be like a waterproof, impermeable fabric, there's the seams that go over the zipper and stuff where there's like 2 pieces of fabric so that inside there's like a pocket of just space, right? Because you've got the inside layer and the outside layer.
Yeah.
And water had gotten in there and filled it. So it was like bubble wrap filled with water and I could squeeze it and water would squirt out of it. And I don't know how that happens to a rain jacket. Like that
Being
makes me
outside for 8 or 24 hours.
exactly. And I had a roll bag that was a waterproof roll bag, and my down jacket and some of my clothes inside of there were damp. And it just makes me think: do I need different gear, or is there conditions where stuff just isn't going to be dry? So I don't know, but
It was nice so getting back, I took a shower and like went straight to sleep, and your ass is sore, your nipples hurt, like everything hurts. But it was really nice getting into warm, dry clothes, just crawling into bed and literally just like passing out we also, our cousin went downstairs and asked if we could check out later. So they let us check out at noon instead of 11.
Yeah.
So we got an extra hour of sleep, which is all time.
So
like
I think we went to sleep by like 7.
Yeah.
So we got 4 hours of sleep, and then we had a 2-hour drive home. But that 4 hours of sleep was
Awesome.
plenty. It felt so good.
Yeah. And then we got up, and then we had to take all of our gear and our bikes and put them back in the trailer and in the car and like take off. And we're just go back outside, and it's still raining, and it's still bad. Like the conditions were just constant.
Yeah, there was racers. So this was Sunday that we drove back, and the race finished at. You had to be done by 11 p.m. Sunday, and so I can't even imagine any of the bikers, runners, or skiers that were out there because that trail was horrible. Like there's no way you could ride a snowmobile on that with the puddles and stuff, and trying to run through that or ski through it with all the water that had only gotten worse overnight. So anybody that finished Sunday, like you are a fucking warrior because that was the most insane course at that point in time.
Yeah, it's almost like harder or like worse for the people in the back, the pack, because the conditions, the trail got so much worse.
For this kind of, for this race.
Yeah, like people who finished the last half of the group, like you had way more grit and determination to finish because it was so much worse than the people in the front because they got, the best of the worst conditions.
Right. Well, and then you're out there for less time too. The longer
Yeah.
you're out there, the wetter stuff gets, the more it wears on you mentally.
Yeah.
And like we were saying before, that's the biggest thing is like being in a strong mental state, being able to, cognitively make choices of, okay, I need to stop and change layers. Okay, I need to stop and air down my tires because it's so easy to get caught up in your own head or just be in this, foggy state of mind where you're not thinking about that and you just keep going forward and like, oh, I just need to keep moving. And that's the kind of state of mind that you end up getting frostbite because you didn't change your gloves.
Or setting up your bivvy in the middle of the trail.
Exactly, yeah, because you lose your mind out there. And so being able to stay on top of your stuff, even if you're going slow, that's what's going to get you there and get you there safely.
Well, we finished. We were the two youngest people to do the 160. There was no one under 30 besides us.
Yep.
We were the only people in our 20s to finish, which is pretty insane.
And so we've finished, the official results aren't up right now, but based on all the times that they have and all the racers, they have listed what the times were, so it's unofficially official. But we finished 10th and 11th, and so out of the 52 bikers that started the 160-mile event, 19 of them finished. So it was like a 30% finish rate.
That's mental.
Uh-huh.
I wonder, we should look this up after this, but I'm curious about the runners and like that kind of finish rate. How many people backed out of that? And,
That's a good question.
but,
Well, they started Friday morning for the 160.
True.
Because they got an extra day, so maybe conditions were better then. But the second half was still shit.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter which race you were doing.
But yeah, so moral of the story is you can't train for anything.
Yep, bring more gear than you need and hope for the best.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then we got Arrowhead in 4 weeks at the end of January up in International
3
Falls.
weeks. Yeah.
But that one's notorious for being 30 degrees below zero, and as long as it's dry and you can have dry layers on, you can stay warm, I think.
Right.
So,
And just like, I'm excited for hard packed trail.
yeah,
Like,
the course will be fast. At least you can hold 10 miles an hour.
right.
So we'll see how that goes. That's the next one on the list.
Yeah, that was an event.
It sure was.
Cool. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say. We got a free hat. All the finishers get a hat.
Yeah, you don't get the hat if you don't finish.
Yeah. So I don't know, man.
That's what it was.
Yeah. Hope this didn't like discourage you from wanting to try it because
It's not going to be worse than that. Just know that.
yeah, it's a fun race. I mean, people put it on. Chris and Helen, they're awesome, and the people are like all the racers are really cool. Like
That was the best part.
volunteers.
The people that we met out there, like we met some really cool runners and bikers, and then the volunteers at all the aid stations or the checkpoints were the most helpful people and just pick up your spirits. You know, they continually come up while you're sitting there just
asking if you need anything.
yeah, you're totally fried and you're just got this 1,000-mile stare off it. Like you're just looking at a wall and just not even thinking. And then just like, yeah, do you need anything? Like, can we get you something? It's just like, what? No.
Take me home.
Yeah. That's why he was like, do you need anything? I'm like, yeah, a motor for my bike. Like anything. But the people were amazing, and shout out to all of them for being there, and Chris and Helen for putting on an awesome event, and going up and down with the snowmobile checking on people. Cause
Yeah.
that was,
This is the 11th year they've done it. So this is
was it?
yeah.
I thought it 9th or
No, it's
was
the
it
11th. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's been going on for quite some time. I will say it is a pretty boring race because you're on the same trail.
Yeah.
So we listened to some music for a little bit, and it's nice to have someone to talk to or just kind of break it up a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of people do headphones and listen to podcasts or music.
Cool. Well,
Thanks for listening. Is that it?
Yep.
All right.